In this video, we'll walk through examining correlation in SPSS using the data from the supplementary exercises for the Correlational Design and Analysis chapter. The data file is titled Miksza and Elpus Jazz Occupation Data for Supplementary Exercises, which in turn is based on a published study of the kinds of careers that jazz students aspire to achieve, which was published by DeVroop in 2012. Our data set includes 4 variables. One variable that's simply a code indicating each of the various participants. Another variable indicating the prestige of occupational aspirations, with higher scores indicating aspirations for more prestigious activities and lower scores for less prestigious activities. Another variable that represents the prestige of one's occupational expectations, with the same scaling as the previous variable. And lastly, a variable that represents the extent to which significant others may have influenced these individuals' aspirations, such as parents, relatives, private instructors, etc. And this variable is on a scale of 1, little influence, to 10, very much influence. So the scenario given for this accompanying exercise is that a researcher is interested in the relationships among occupational aspirations, expectations, and social influences of collegiate jazz students. So let's look at whether there is a relationship between the levels of prestige of the participants' occupational aspirations and expectations. So first, when looking at relationships between 2 quantitative variables, we want to visualize the data by creating some kind of a scatter plot. So let's do that in SPSS. It's pretty simple to do. There's actually a built-in feature in SPSS where there are several kinds of common types of plots that are already designed, where you just have to drop variables in. And so under the Graphs Legacy Dialogues menu, you can find scatter or /dot for our scatter plot option. And since we only want to see the relationship between 2 variables visualized, we're simply going to ask for a simple scatter plot. So now we could put one variable as our y variable and put our other variable in as our x variable, and simply click OK. And so what we get in our output is a simple visualization of the relationship between occupational expectations, prestige, and occupational aspirations, prestige. And you can see that there's a pretty clear linear relationship that seems to be perhaps moderate. It's very cloudy, this data set, but on the other hand, it's fairly clear that as one tends to expect a prestigious occupation in the future, they also tend to aspire to a prestigious occupation, which is something that you would guess, I suppose, intuitively as well. So now that we know that our data is linear in its relationship, and we can compute a correlation coefficient to get a more specific summary of the relationship between these 2 variables. I'm going to go ahead and close this to declutter a bit. And given that these are both continuous variables, and we're going to go with the assumption that they're normally distributed and whatnot, we can use Pearson's correlation coefficient that we described pretty extensively in our chapter. And so to do that in SPSS, we'll go hunt through our Analyze menu all the way down to where it says Correlate. And since we only have 2 variables, we're only looking at a simple bivariate correlation. Click on that option. And just as with the scatter plot, we'll enter the 2 variables that we'd like to correlate. And you can see Pearson is clicked here as, or ticked here in this box as the correlation coefficient that's going to be produced. And we can click OK. And so now we have a correlation matrix, which is kind of silly with just 2 variables, since it's really the replication of the same relationship. And so obviously the relationship of this variable with itself is perfect. It's a 1. And then we get the actual coefficient we're interested in, the relationship of occupational aspiration, prestige, and occupational expectation, prestige, which shows a coefficient of 0.46. And so this suggests that we do indeed have a moderate small to moderate positive relationship between these two things. That is, scores on this increase, scores on this variable tend to increase as well, and conversely, as scores on this variable decrease, scores on this variable tend to decrease as well as you move through the various participants in the sample. Our output will also give us an indicator as to whether our correlation is statistically significant. And the specific null hypothesis test in this case is a correlation of 0. And the results suggest that it is very unlikely that we arrive at a coefficient at least as large as 0.46 if it were truly 0 in the population. And we know that it's very unlikely because we can see here our p-value, which SPSS labels as a sig value, is 0.000. And so it's not that there's a 0 chance, but if you click on this here, double click, and float over it, you'll see it's a really, really small chance. So we're talking about 12 zeros in front of, 12 decimal points in front of the 1.911 number there, essentially. So it's a really infinitesimally small chance. So we can say, yeah, we're pretty confident this is a statistically significant finding here. And so as described in our chapter, there are many other types of correlation coefficients that can be used to examine bivariate relationships with different kinds of data. You can find options for computing Spearman's coefficient, for example, for ordinal variables. Let's declutter here for a moment. In this very same menu of Correlate and Bivariate, if we were to click Spearman, we can get that correlation summary as well as the Pearson summary, or we can de-click Pearson. Kendall's tau B is another option that we don't explain in much depth in the book, but you could explore it and figure out if that's a coefficient that works with the data you have. And then there are some others that are perhaps pretty common that aren't found in this simple bivariate correlation menu. And let's just hunt for those for a moment. So for example, if you're interested in correlating nominal variables, you'd be interested in using phi, or Kramer's V, as a coefficient. And those coefficients can be found way down here. If you analyze in descriptive statistics, go to cross tabulations. Can be found in the statistics options under cross tabulations, phi and Kramer's V, as well as other kinds of statistical tests that you can run. And it makes sense it's here because cross tabulation is what you would typically do if you were interested in the relationship between two nominal variables. But just to show you that there are many options for running bivariate correlations depending on the data type you have, and SPSS provides a lot of flexibility for that. If you hunt for it and find it, if you hunt for it, you're likely to find a coefficient that will work with the kind of data you have. And so that's the basics of looking at bivariate relationships in SPSS. Thank you very much.